Welcome to this Wise Owl Excel VBA tutorial. In this video we're going to look at how to generate an Outlook email using the Microsoft Word editor. We'll start with a quick recap of how to use Outlook to create a basic empty email and set some of its simple properties. We'll then move on and find how you can get a reference to the word editor of the email, followed by a quick demonstration of the word range object and how you can use that to do things like insert text at a set point and copy Excel objects such as tables and charts. We'll then use all of those techniques to build up an entire email from scratch, showing you the best process to use to make it look sentable at the end. So let's get started. The aim of this video is to show you how to create a basic Outlook email using a combination of written text and information copied and pasted from an Excel worksheet. So we'll create a combination of some written text along with this table and this chart to create a simple email which looks roughly like this. It's nothing hugely complicated, but it does involve learning how to use Outlook's Word editor in order to perform the copy and paste between Excel and the email. Now, we've spent some time in a previous video talking in detail about how to work with Outlook in VBA, so let's just have a quick recap of the basics to generate the blank email in the first place. We can head to the Developer tab and open the Visual Basic Editor, insert a new module into the project, and then begin a new subroutine called Create Simple Email. Before we write any code, we'll need to set references to two different object libraries. So let's head to the Tools menu and choose References. And then in the dialog box that appears, we'll need to first of all find Microsoft Outlook's object library, which is listed on my machine at least as Microsoft Outlook 16.0 object library. So of course this will depend on which version of Office you're using. A little later on we'll need to reference something in the Word library as well, so let's, while we're here, find Microsoft Word 16 object library and then set a reference to that as well. So we can check the box next to that, and then we can click OK, and now we have access to the object models that we need. Now we can start writing the code that will generate the basic email object. Let's begin with a simple variable which holds a reference to an Outlook application. I'll say dim ol as outlook.application. I'll have a second variable called mi, which will hold a reference to an outlook.mail item. I can then create a new instance of Outlook by saying set ol equals new outlook.application. And then finally, let's create a new email object by saying set mi equals ol.createItem, and specifically I want an ol mail item. What I can then do is make the email object appear on screen by saying mi.display. I can then set a couple of its basic properties. Let's say mi.to equals, let's go for someone at somewhere.com. And then I can also set a basic subject by saying mi.subject equals, and then let's just say something like movies. I can now run this subroutine just to see the end result. It won't be particularly impressive at this point, but there we go, there's our blank email with a signature and the to address set and the subject set. What I really want to do now is get access to the Word editor component of this email object, which allows me to use Word's methods and properties to work with the content of the email. Let's close this email down without saving any changes. I'll also go back and close down the previous example that I was showing you, and then we can get back to the code and then start getting access to the Word editor. You can get a reference to the Word editor of an email by referring to, first of all, the getInspector property, followed by the Word editor property. This property returns a reference to a Word document object. What I'd like to do is capture a reference to that document object in a variable. So let's head to the top of the procedure and declare a new variable, I'll call mine doc, as word.document. And this is why we set the reference to the Word object library earlier. We can then amend this line so that it says set doc equals mi.getInspector.wordEditor, and that will capture a reference to that document object. The great thing about this is that we now have access to the range of methods and properties of a Word document object, which allows us to manipulate the email in far more complex ways than just using Outlook's standard editor. Perhaps the most important thing you need to understand in order to work with the Word document effectively is how the range object works. A range in a Word document can represent any portion of that document. The way that I've referenced it here, it refers to the entire contents of that document. So as a very simple first example, what I could do is replace all of the text in the current document with a new simple phrase, such as, let's say, dear someone. If I then run this subroutine, you'll see that the entire content of the email get replaced with that simple string of text. Now, of course, that's not quite sufficient to achieve the results we want. I'm going to show you a few more basic techniques with the range object that allow you to build up an email. Bear in mind that there are many other things we can do with the range object as well. I'm going to show you a few basics, but there are many other things you can do, and you can learn about those on the Microsoft Docs website. There's a couple of articles all about how the range object works. Let's return to the code though, and let's think about first of all how we can, rather than replace the entire content of the document, insert something into the document instead. To add some more text to the range of the document rather than replace its entire contents, let's remove the text property and look at one of the insert methods instead. I've got two methods I could choose to use here for inserting text. There's insert after and insert before. I'd like to insert the welcome or the greeting before any of the existing contents of the email. So I'm going to use the insert before method. And you'll see that there's a single compulsory parameter, text as string. I can optionally name that parameter just to make the code a little clearer to someone else reading it. So if I were to perform this method, insert before, run this subroutine now, you should see that the new phrase gets added at the beginning of the range of the document rather than replacing its entire contents. If you wanted to add text that's a little more complex than just a couple of words, you might consider using a variable to construct the message first and then referencing the variable here. So let's have a simple string variable, let's say dim message text as string. And then before we assign or insert some text into the document, we can say message text equals, and then start building up the phrase. So let's say dear someone, followed by a comma. And then I'd like to have a couple of line breaks, so I'm going to concatenate a VB new line character. And in fact, I'm going to have a couple of those in sequence, VB new line and VB new line, followed by another phrase which will say something like, please see table below. So this is going to be the line just above which the table will be inserted. I'd like to give myself a bit of a blank line below that phrase, so I've got the table inserted below, so let's have a VB new line below this, and then another blank line as well, VB new line. What I can then do is, rather than build up all of that phrase inside this, this insert before method, I can simply refer to my message text variable. Let's have a quick look at the results of that. If I were to run the subroutine, the new email appears with dear someone and then a line break and then a please see table below and a new blank line below that as well. What I'd like to do next is copy the table from the Excel worksheet, which is simple enough to do, and then paste it in at a specific position within my email, which is slightly less easy to do. If I just run the code again to generate the email, just so we can see where we need to insert the table, it's got to sit somewhere between the greeting text that I've added and the signature which I want to keep. Now this means I can't just get away with referencing the entire range of the document and inserting or pasting before the entire contents, because that would mean that my table would sit before my greeting, which is no good. One way to work out where to position something in a Word document is to specify with the range method exactly which character you want to insert before or after. So the way this works is you can count the characters. So let's say, for example, I wanted to insert the text Mr. So it says, dear Mr. someone. If I were to count the characters, then I can see that essentially this is position 0 before the text, then the position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's just do a quick little demo of that. If I want to reference character number 5, I'm going to say doc.range, and then if I open some parentheses after the word range, it allows me to specify the start and the end character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say range 5 to 5 dot insert after, and then I'm going to set the text that I'm going to insert to be equal to the word Mr, followed by a space, and there we go. So let's have a look at what happens when I run this subroutine again. What I should see now is that I've inserted the four characters mr dot space after character position number 5. So what I could do now is manually count up the characters that I've added in my simple greeting text. If I just close down the email, don't save any changes, let's remove this line here, which inserts the word miss it, which I didn't actually really want. So I could count up from start to finish how many characters are involved in that text, but that's a little awkward to do. And if I then make changes to the phrase, the greeting message, then I've got to recount the characters. So perhaps what's a simpler thing to do is use the len function to calculate the length of my message text. So let's do this just as a quick demonstration. If I say doc.range, open some parentheses, and I want to set the start of this to be equal to the length of my current greeting. So I'm going to use the len function to refer to the len of my message text. If I can spell message text, that will help. There we are. I'd also like to end that at the same position, so I'm going to say len message text again. A bit of repetition there. It might make more sense to calculate the length and store the result in a separate variable, but I'll go with this for now. And then what I can do is say, just again by way of simple demonstration, I can say dot insert after, and then say something simple like let's just say test, just to prove that we've got some new text in there. If I then run the subroutine, what we should find is that my new bit of text goes strangely in between the word, the letter R and the rest of the word regards. So what's going on there? Well, the reason this is happening is because annoyingly, the VB new line character actually counts as two separate characters. The VB new line character is a combination of a carriage return and a line feed. So when VBA counts these, it's counting 2 for each new line. So I've got 4 extra characters than I really wanted. So what I could do instead is subtract 4 from the length of the message text. And if I attempt to run this one again, I should see that this time my word test goes in where I intended it to. If you're thinking this is all getting a little complicated, I absolutely agree. And it only becomes more complicated the more text we add in from top to bottom in the email. To find a new insertion point becomes really complicated. So what we're going to do at this point is take a slightly different approach, and that's to build our email from the bottom upwards. So we'll actually start by adding in the farewell message, followed by the chart, followed by a phrase that says see the chart, followed by the table, working our way all the way up to the greeting message. So let's just close this down without saving any changes, and then let's get rid of the test text and think about how we can build our email from the bottom up. The lines which add in the greeting message will be required now, but not until the end of the procedure. So just so that they don't interfere with any other part of the code that I'm trying to demonstrate, let's just comment them out for now so we can build this up step by step. What we'll do instead is use a similar technique to generate a farewell message, something which asks the user to reply with any questions. So a very similar technique, we can say message text equals, please reply with questions. And then we can simply say to insert that after the very beginning of the email. So we could say, as we did before, doc.range.insert before, and then add the message text. But if we want to start thinking about how the range of a document is built up, thinking about positions and insertion points, let's be a little more specific. Let's say doc.range, and then the very beginning of the document is position 0, as we know. And then we can say insert after, so after the very beginning of the email, and then say message text. Okay, so having done that, if I were to run the subroutine, I'll see that my farewell message appears now right at the very beginning. But now I can continue building on top of that to build up the rest of the email. So let's close that down without saving it. And next, let's look at how we can copy and paste the chart from our Excel spreadsheet. Copying the chart is reasonably straightforward. We've talked about referencing charts and chart objects in other videos in this series, so I won't go into too much detail here. But I know this is a chart object embedded on a worksheet. I know that it's got a name of chart1, or simply by virtue of the fact that it is the only chart object on the worksheet. I also know that it's got an index number of 1. So regardless of how I'd like to reference it, what I need to do is apply the copy method to it. So let's refer to the sheet object to which it belongs. First of all, that's sheet 1, and then I can refer to the chart objects collection, and again I can either reference it by its name, chart 1, in double quotes, or I can simply reference it as chart object 1. I then need to refer to the chart item that sits inside that container, followed by the chart area of that chart so that I can subsequently copy it. So there we go, there's the copying of the chart. What I can now do is paste the copied chart into the document at a specified position, and the specified position is going to be the exact same one that I referenced here. So in fact, to save a bit of time, let's just copy and paste doc.range 00, so the origin of the document. I'm not going to say insert after this time. Insert after requires me to enter some text, and what I want to do is simply paste at the position I've specified. So I can say doc.range00.paste. In fact, let me group these two lines together to make things a little more consistent. Okay, so let's have a look at the results of this one now. If I run the subroutine, I will see that my new email appears, but unfortunately, my chart is sitting essentially on the same line as my farewell message, please reply with questions. Not quite what I wanted. I need a couple of line breaks or new line characters in between my farewell message and the chart itself. That's simple enough to resolve. Let's close down that message without saving it. All I need to do is add my new line characters before my farewell message. So VB new line and VB new line, and please reply with questions. Once I've done that, if I were to run the subroutine again, you'll see that now I get my chart and then a blank line and then my farewell message. It's a little counterintuitive building an email from the bottom upwards, but once you get into the swing of things, it makes a lot more sense. So we'll continue with this theme to add in a table next, and then a phrase which says, please see the table below. Oh, we've already got that one, haven't we? We need a phrase which says, please see the chart below, and then the table, and then finally our welcome message. Let's save some time here now by copying and pasting the lines which have already inserted some text into the document. So I'm going to copy these. I'm then going to paste those below the area where I pasted in the chart. And then I can simply alter the message I'm saying here. So it says, rather than please reply with questions, I'm going to say, please see chart below. So again, remembering that this will appear above the chart, so it will make sense in the final message. I've got a couple of blank lines before this bit of text so that when I insert the table, there will be a gap. I'd also like a gap between this piece of text and the chart as well. So let's add in a couple of VB new line characters to the end of that phrase, and then finally insert it after the origin of the document. Let's run the code again just to make sure that everything still looks sensible. So we've got our please see chart below, we've got a blank line, we've got the chart, blank line, farewell message, and then the signature. Excellent. The next task is to copy the table from sheet 1 into the email. So let's refer to range A1 and the current region to which that belongs. So I can say something like sheet1.range A1.current region.copy, and that will copy the entire table. What I can then do is attempt to paste it into the email, and I can do that in the same way that I did with the chart, I suppose. I can paste it at the origin, so I can say doc.range00.paste. And a quick check of that, if I were to run the subroutine, will result in my table being pasted, just like so. So all that remains is to bring back the welcome message that we originally started with. Let's close down the email without saving any changes, and then we can bring back our welcome message. All we should need to do in order to make this work is to uncomment the lines of code we added in earlier on, and then run the subroutine again, and then see a potential problem with what we've done. Hopefully you can easily make out the fact that our welcome message has actually been inserted into the top row of the table. So it's actually part of the table that we pasted in, which isn't quite what we wanted. Very simple solution to this. If I were to just remove or close down that message without saving the changes, rather than pasting our table in at the extreme origin of the document at the very start position, what we could do instead is simply shift it one character or one range, I suppose, to the right. So if we paste it at position 1,1 and then run the subroutine again, this time we should see that our welcome message is part of the email, not part of the table. It might be worthwhile removing one of the extra line breaks between the please see table below and the table itself, just for consistency. So if I close down the email again, and then I can remove, let's see, one of these new line characters, run the subroutine one more time, And then this time we should see that things are somewhat more consistent, so more even gaps. If I scroll down, we can see that the email still has the signature, which is one of the key things we wanted to keep. So there we go, we built up our entire message out of some bits of text, a copied table, a copied chart, and the email signature. Hopefully that's been useful for you. Thanks for watching. If you like what you've seen here, why not head over to the WiseOwl website, where you can find loads more free resources, including these videos, some written blogs and tutorials, and even some exercises that you can download to practice your skills. Thanks for watching, see you next time.